And this chapter's name is Calmness. Calmness. If you haven't read that book of prose by Ili Chiara, if you're inclined toward Advaita, to the idea of one without a second, or the path of knowledge, like Buddhism is, you would really enjoy his writings in a book called The Silence of the Mind. I have read it through probably twice now, and it's become my bedside book. I find that the best time to read Ili Chiara is about 2:30 in the morning, when you wake up and the world is silent and you can't go back to sleep, and you just want something. And the mind is very pure in the middle of the night. It's already kind of relaxed and let most things go. And so, like Sri Ramakrishna says, it really is a great time for practice. And so if you're one of those folks that wakes up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep, Ili Chiara would be a great reading. It just puts the mind in a beautiful space. And this chapter is going to have to touch on some of the principles, no doubt, for this calmness. All right, let's jump in here. I always realize I don't have my glasses when I pick a book up. There was a time when I could fake it, but not anymore. All right, calmness. For Zen students, a weed is a treasure. A Zen poem says, "After the wind stops, I see a flower falling. Because of the singing bird, I find the mountain calmness. Before something happens in the realm of calmness, we do not feel the calmness. Only when something happens within do we find the calmness. There is a Japanese saying, for the moon there is the cloud, for the flower there is the wind. When we see a part of the moon covered by a cloud or a tree or a weed, we feel how round the moon is. But when we see the clear moon without anything covering it, we do not feel that roundness. That the same way we do when we see it through something else." This is a marvelous hint for practice right here. I've shared this before, but we can see movement, right? All of our senses are geared towards seeing movement. And I always use that example, my tired old example of the McDonald's bag blowing down the beach, right? You'll be standing there. I was standing there watching the sunset in Santa Barbara, and it was just beautiful. The sky was all lit up, and it's always windy on the beach there, but there was a used McDonald's bag went blowing down the beach, and I was entertained because I saw my senses were more interested in the blowing bag than they were in this amazing sunset. But that's kind of poetic. It comes down to a very real principle here. You cannot see change if you're in the change, right? And again, we say the elevator situation. So this entire world indicates that unmoving absolute within you. We talked about how for a relative world, there has to be an original stationary point from which the rest of it is relative. If you do not have that unchanging absolute, you have nothing. You have a situation where nothing can be known. Because to know something is big, you have to know that something is small. You have to compare two things. And the mind always requires something to compare something to. The mind is relative. The mind is probably where relativity dwells. And so the mind is always looking for subject, object, and relationship between them to construct its relative universe. It's aware of the oneness outside, but it's only getting 5 disparate pieces of information at a time to reconstruct it. So it does it through objects and relationships. And everything moves, everything's changing in this world. Nothing is the same from moment to moment, nothing. That's why boredom is the worst of delusions. You're in the middle of rapid, constant change, and you've become unaware. You have stopped seeing, and you've begun to live in a world of assumptions. You're no longer present in the moment, which is why They call it sleep, and why the great sages say we have to awaken. You know, it used to confuse me so much. I remember when I was 7 sitting in church and the preacher kept talking about wake up, waking up. And I was looking around like, I am awake. What's he talking about? You know, one of those things you don't understand what's going on. And actually, I'm not sure that I still understand it. I'm just catching hints of it in myself, where I see the world of assumption that I live in. But what's delightful about it is that it points to that one unchanging reality within. All movement indicates the silence within. Silence is the backdrop of all sound. Space is the backdrop to all objects. Emptiness is the backdrop to objects, to something. And so it is what allows something to exist. Silence is what allows sound to exist. And stillness is what allows movement to exist. And that is our nature, that unchanging absolute within, that peace that passes all understanding. And all of the change in the world is indicated by it. And what this is saying is, when you're out there in the world of change, why out there? If we're right here in the world of change, let all of the change point at the stillness within you. Don't get caught up in the change. When you're walking down the street and you see all of the colors and peoples and storefronts and whatnot, our entertainment as worldly folk is to pay attention to all the change and just be lost in the change and completely oblivious to our inner world. If a sage walks down the same street, he uses all of that change, all of that light, to indicate the nature of that divine self, Buddha nature in the terms of this book, Atman in the terms of more of the generic path, the Jnana Yoga, and the beloved in terms of those who are practicing a path of bhakti or devotion. All of this outside world and all of its frenetic movement indicates that, the I am, being, existence. And so it's a wonderful tool. You can make your biggest distraction in life your biggest tool in life by inverting what it's indicating. Instead of watching the change and going outward, know that it's indicating the silence and the space that you have within, that allows it to exist. When you are doing Zazen, you are within the complete calmness of your mind. You do not feel anything, you just sit. But the calmness of your sitting will encourage you in your everyday life. So actually, you will find the value of Zen in your everyday life rather than while you sit. Now that's a beautiful notion. You know, life is practice. There is no such thing as secular in the Vedanta world. Everything is sacred, everything is holy. And when your practice, the boundaries of your practice go through the whole day. And this is just one way that you can see that. The benefits of your practice may not be apparent when you sit and do them. You maybe sit there shifting in your seat, you know, waiting for your timer to go off, or, you know, feeling like, oh my gosh, minutes are passing so slowly today. You know, you can have all those wrestlings in your practice, but just doing your practice, just being available to your practice will change you for the day. It will establish your mind, and it'll be a great help. You'll be able to see that change. You know, Swami Brahmananda makes that promise, tells the young brahmacharis, the young novices, do your practice, sit. And if you do not touch some bliss, I think he does a year or 2 years, a challenge to them, then you can come and slap me. That's what he said. And of course, none of them had to go and slap it, because it is true. Do your practice consistently with some earnestness and sincerity, and in no time you'll find a change come over yourself. You are that divine light, as it were, that's shining out. And in that calmness and quietness, that absence of thought, that self, that divine light within you, that Buddha nature manifests, becomes apparent to you. So all you have to do is stop being interested in your delusions. Stop being interested in your ignorance. Stop loving your ignorance. Let go of it. And in the silence that ensues, because a troubled mind, or a mind with waves, a mind with thoughts running around, is the delusion, right? That's what creates your story. It's what creates your sense of past, present, and future. It's what creates the notion of cause and effect. It's all in mind, because without that arrangement in the mind, all we have experienced, all that we are, is this moment. The great I am, in the terms of the Christians, that isness and Vedanta, that being, and your enlightened emptiness or Buddha nature within. So actually, you will find the value of Zen in your everyday life rather than while you sit. But this does not mean you should neglect Zazen. Even though you do not feel anything when you sit, if you do not have this Zazen experience, you cannot find anything. You just find weeds or trees or clouds in your daily life. You do not see the moon. That is why you are always complaining about something. But for Zen students, a weed, which for most people is worthless, is a treasure. With this attitude, whatever you do, life becomes an art. Okay, he knows how to get my attention. This art of living, of being fully present in the moment. Instead of complaining about the changing world constantly messing up your meditation, understand that it's the constantly changing world that allows your meditation, that leads you inward, that makes you aware of a stillness from which all change can be observed. We're able to see all forms of change, right? And as long as we know our separateness from them. It's like sitting on this planet right now. Every one of us looks like we're sitting so still. And yet, if we were to be aware of all the different directions that we're moving right now, at what speeds, we would be overwhelmed. We're spinning around the Earth axis, and it's spinning around the sun, and it's spinning around the galaxy, and that galaxy is whirling elsewhere through space at speeds we can't even imagine. And yet, because the body mind is in that change, we're not aware of it. We can't see it. We don't experience it. And so the fact that you can experience the change that of the senses and of the world indicates that inner peace, that inner light, the goal of meditation, if such a thing can be said. Because of course enlightenment has no cause. It's the only effect with no cause. Why? Because it always is. It's a matter of realization, not a matter of attainment or creation. It's within you. And it's an amazing effort to see it, because it's a non-effort, and we don't know what that means, which is why we have to work so long in our meditation. It's that funny thing. You are that. It's the final realization. Final realization is none of that was necessary. You have always been yourself and will always be yourself. But it's this realization of that, because we're so addicted to thinking. We're so addicted to a changing world and to measuring everything by it. And that stillness that comes from within has stepped out of our awareness. So we have to not do anything when we sit. We have to do an undoing. And we're not sure what that means, because Thakur says we're not the doer, and that's key. There's nothing to be done. When you sit, you need not do anything. All doing is in front of you. It's on the observer side, on the observee side, not on the observer side, right? Anything that you do, anything that you try, anything that you attempt is in front of you. It's objectified. And we're trying to sense, maybe through intuition, an undoing self that is always present, that we simply are not paying attention to, that we simply do not recognize because of our habitual not seeing it, or habitual defining ourselves from the outside in instead of from the inside out. All right. And this idea of everything becomes art really is a wonderful experience, because everything becomes divine beauty from that space. When you're able to see the moment as it is, regardless of what it contains, whether it's suffering or not, The moment is art. The moment is the beauty of the divine. To see it even once undefined is ecstasy. It's realization. To experience this moment once, even for a split second, is realization. When you know what it is without your mind telling you what it is, when your knowledge is instantaneous and spontaneously available. It's not a query. You're not looking for adjectives. It's an isness that comes before adjectives. Has no adjectives because adjectives always point at other. You can only have adjectives if you have another. And so in that state of deep meditation, there is no other. In the final truth, one without a second. So there's no adjectives to describe it. It can't be objectified. It's not put in front of you, and it's nothing that you're doing that makes it happen, because it's not happening. It has always been. It is an isness. So if you can take all of those hints together from Suzuki this morning and surrender to them, accept them fully, I would say probably no more than 2 or 3 hours before you're enlightened. When you practice Zazen, you should not try to attain anything. This is what he's saying. You should just sit in the complete calmness of your mind and not rely on anything, right? So that's sitting with non-resistance. Non-resistance means have no concern about the contents of your mind, good, bad, whether they exist or not. You are separate and apart. Watch the mind like you would watch a television, right? Just sit there and watch. Actually, not really, because most of us get attached to television. That's why we get engaged with it. We attach to the stories we hear coming from there. We attach to the images as being people and begin to identify our own feelings with them. So we understand a TV show. You know, in actuality, the TV show is not the show. You provide the show. The TV show just prompts your attachments, called hypnotization. That's what it is. So interestingly enough, all of our visual entertainments, it requires us to make them entertainments. Otherwise, they're just changing colors on a screen with an independent soundtrack. So sitting in your complete silence, complete awareness that you're watching television, you know, complete awareness that you're in the theater watching a movie. Don't be caught up in the story of the film, the hypnotization of what's moving and changing in front of you. Remain aware of your isness instead. Sit in the complete calmness of your mind and not rely on anything. Just keep your body straight without leaning over or against something. To keep your body straight means not to rely on anything. This is what Swami Prabodhananda taught me over the years. You know, our ultimate goal in the Vedanta is freedom, to break out of cause and effect, to break out of adjectives, out of limitations and restrictions, out of definitions and particulars, to return to our universal self. We are everything. The dream is contained within us. So we don't rely on anything. That's why, you know, it's fine to listen to calming music in your meditations in the beginning, but anything outside of yourself that you use as an aid ultimately is slavery, is bondage. And so, you know, that's why guided meditation, Swami Prabodhananda really disliked the idea of guided meditation because he was a free soul, you know, so he knew that freedom. And it took many years of the devotees asking and asking and asking before he finally agreed to lead some guided meditations. But this is the notion. There should be absolute freedom. You should require nothing. You know, in the beginning we do, and we shouldn't be ashamed of that, nor make it cause us to jump forward ahead of where we are. If at the moment you need that music, or you need that guided meditation, or you need that particular bell or whatnot, absolutely, whatever is helpful. That's part of the little fence we put around, you know, the small tree when it's a sapling. Eventually we grow beyond that, where that meditative spirit never leaves. And not only that, but like Sri Ramakrishna, everything in the world that he experienced indicated the Divine Mother for him, you know. indicated that divine freedom within. In this way, physically and mentally, you will obtain complete calmness. But to rely on something or to try to do something in Zazen is dualistic and not complete calmness. Yeah, we've talked about that. The reason that we see the world as other is because we're broken inside into two parts, the thinker and the listener, the ego self and everything else. That we've created a false division within us that separates us from the whole, from this universal isness. And because we've set that dynamic up inside, we experience it on the projected outside, because the projected outside is just a projection of mind, projection of that inner consciousness, that inner light. And so we have to repair the rift within. That's how the rift without disappears. And that only happens by ceasing being the doer. Ramakrishna talks about that all through his life story. You are not the doer. You are the divine machine, as it were. You operate spontaneously according to the universe as a whole, as to that one without a second. But it's like your dream. There is really nothing happening. You are the sleeper and not the dreamer, and not the dreamed, not that which is in the dream. So you see, this notion of doing in your practice isn't helpful. Your practice is about surrender and accepting. Surrender and accepting the moment as perfect. Surrender and accepting the moment as divine. Accepting that you need nothing. That everything as it is as it should be. So you resist nothing. And then the second part is you grab onto nothing, you attach to nothing. No me and mine in the mind. That's what attachment is. It's saying that's me. The thought goes across of I'm having a good mind, good meditation. And instead of just letting that thing pass and letting it fall, we see that word I in there, like, that's me. I'm having a good meditation. What's actually experiencing the meditation is body and mind, right? You are there. That's all. You are the life of that. Yeah. In our everyday life, we are usually trying to do something, trying to change something into something else, or trying to attain something. Just this trying is already in itself an expression of our true nature. The meaning lies in the effort itself. We should find out the meaning of our effort before we attain something. So Dogen says we should attain enlightenment before we attain enlightenment. It is not after attaining enlightenment that we find its true meaning. The trying to do something in itself is enlightenment. When we are in difficulty or in distress, there we have enlightenment. When we are in defilement, there we should have composure. Usually we find it very difficult to live in the evanescence of life, but it is only within the evanescence of life that we can find the joy of eternal life. So eternal life is the backdrop which allows the temporary life. Immortality is what allows time. It is the ultimate reality. But that's why Thakur says the ultimate reality is not one or the other. They are both the same. All right? They're both the same. And so this duality, this thinking that they're not the same, is the problem. Ramakrishna says that the fire and its power to burn can't be separated. The milk and its whiteness can't be separated. And so this eternal stillness that, and its manifestation cannot be separated. God is noun and the creation as a verb. They cannot be separated. They are one without one and the same thing. It's only when we separate ourselves out as an experiencer, separating from the experience, that we become two, that we see change, we see difference. All right, these are kind of odd ideas, difficult to assume because we're so identified with mind. We're so identified with mind as the source of knowledge rather than being as the source of knowledge. That's the knowing ourselves from the inside out. Yes, did someone say something?
That's me.
Yes.
I I'm just confused because the previous paragraph says when you practice zazen, you should not try to attain anything. That makes
Right.
sense to, but he's just going. I don't know what he's saying in the next paragraph. In our everyday life, we are usually trying to do something, trying to change something, and that is our true nature. Am I confusing this with what we talk about as true nature?
No,
Um,
no, it's subtle what he's saying there, is that our awareness of imbalance is what causes the attempt to do. And so that awareness of the imbalance is our key, our key to the perfection which recognizes the imbalance. Without that perfected self within, you could not see the imbalance that makes the embodied mind, the embodied self, feel the need for change, feel the need for perfection. You see, so everything points at the perfection by which actually everything is measured. And it's because, you see, we step into body mind, we identify with it, and it's uncomfortable. And so we try and change. But because we've stepped into body mind with identity, we try and affect that change through the body mind, right? And what are we doing through the body and mind? We're trying to reattain, to reestablish that balance that we intuitively know, because we are not the body and mind. You see, so our dissatisfaction in identity with the limited only exists because of our knowledge of a perfection that belongs to the self outside of the limited, outside of the body-mind complex. And so he's talking about really understanding that everything is an indication of self, or of this Buddha nature, intrinsic within us. If we didn't have that inherent perfection, we wouldn't get hungry. We wouldn't feel like the moment was imperfect and needed to be changed. You know, we're the world by nature. What keeps it moving is imbalance. Ignorance keeps the world ever changing. You know, as soon as, and so that ignorance indicates a knowledge.
I get it. Thank
Okay.
you, Swan.
Yes, when we truly get it, our head comes off. But when we really understand these things, when we live them, you know, when we finally get it all sorted out, yeah.
It almost sounds like you're laughing about me nodding, but I know you
Oh,
mean
no,
something.
no, 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 no. I know.
I got
I laugh because of my own absurdity. Usually we find it very difficult to live in the evanescence of life, but it is only within the evanescence of life that we can find the joy of eternal life. When we understand the nature of the changing and understand our oneness with it, as it were, the threat is gone. When that sense of other disappears, the sense of fear disappears. And when that sense of fear disappears, then unconditioned love manifests. You know, our nature, Satchitananda, that the self, that emptiness in Buddhism, that fullness in the Vedanta, it's one and the same because it's one without a second. And if it's one without a second, there's no one to describe it. It has no attributes, or it has all attributes. It's just a matter of approach. It's not a statement of the nature of that undescribable, because it cannot be put into time, space, causation. It cannot be made linear so that you could use language. There is no subject object and there is no verb. That's why Ramakrishna says it cannot be talked about. It is isness itself. So when you sit, you're trying to let everything that you're having a problem with point at that within you, lets you know that there's a problem, a perceived problem, right? And so he's saying that disturbance of your mind is not a negative thing. It's your identity with the disturbance of mind that causes you the trouble, because then you get involved and you're trying to make the change, which isn't the point. All change is meaningless. All change is pointing at that self, that you, that is not changing. That is how you can see the change. But we don't need to know all of that. Just be still, right? See if you can relax and practice your discernment and your detachment enough so that you become uninterested in the changing aspects of mind, the thoughts that arise and fall. And through that disinterest, the thoughts then can naturally rise and fall. They appear out of nothingness, dance before you in the moment, and then they disappear into nothingness again. If you are identified with any aspect of them or attached to any aspect of them, they arise and they don't go away. You play with them in the mind, and that wakes up all the things related to that particular thought. And they come up and they dance around you and they create a state of mind. And if you've got only one state of mind that you live in, not such a bad deal. That's pretty close to ground floor. You can break out of that pretty well. But we put states of mind within states of mind within states of mind. And that's why our practice is such a process, because we somehow feel that we have to back out of all of that, but we don't. We just have to suddenly realize it has nothing to do with us, that it's just a series of thoughts. This entire universe is just a series of thinking in your mind from an imagined external, blamed on the senses, with symbols to describe their origin, all of these things. By continuing your practice with this sort of understanding, you can improve yourself. Yes, well, improving yourself is also kind of an odd thought, because the self needs no improvement. You are that beloved image of the divine. In the Christian world, that means you are the image of God that was placed within you at creation. That image of God is pure. Pure meaning that there's no me and mine in it. There's no selfishness in it. There's that it's of the nature of love. We know 1 John says God is love. It's of the nature of wisdom, and it's of the nature of being, right? So you can see that in the bhakti path to this truth. In the jnanic path, it's that freedom of thought, the understanding of all the world as thought, all creation as merely thought, a dream within the mind, right? Within the active mind, and the ego, which is just the presence of the divine with a particular. When that universal identifies with the particular, it takes on all attributes. And you say, oh, what does that mean? That's so complicated. But think of when you dream. When you dream, you take on a new self, right? And somehow when you dream, you forget that you're the man in the bed or the woman in the bed, and you become a butterfly. And in the dream, you don't question the butterfly at all. You accept it. Absolutely, of course. Yes, of course, I can fly. Yes, I'm a butterfly, naturally. You see how easily you took up a new body, how easily you took up a new sense of I, a new sense of being, and how easily you forgot your nature as the sleeping body in the bed. You're no longer that, 58-year-old goober sleeping in bed. You're now a butterfly, fresh out of the cocoon, or whatever your dream might be. So pay attention to these things, because this is how we see our nature. This I can attach to anything. And it does regularly. One proposition is that we go from lifetime to lifetime. And in this life, we're thinking, oh, how could I be anything else? Well, look at your dreams and study the sense of I. The sense of I can alight on any particular and become it. identify with it. That's how we know that God, if in the Vedic sense, that God has become all things, right? Not that there's an individual, not that there's an individual separate God that, you know, becomes flowers and such like that by creation. That's one perspective on it. But that's the egoistic perspective when you've already separated yourself from that divinity, from that isness. You know, when we talk of God, we're not talking about a thing. We're not talking about an object. We're talking about your very presence, your very existence, you know, your sustained existence, and the one thing that motivates you, love. Love alone motivates. All right, love is the only motivating power in the universe, Swami Vivekananda says. And so that is your nature and wisdom. All growth happens because of the ultimate wisdom within you. And all learning is actually an uncovering, a removal of ignorance, not an adding of facts, but an uncovering of ignorance, a removal of ignorance. And so this idea of improving yourself, you know, is not really the thing. What is the thing is to stand in the presence of the truth and be changed by it, allowing it to change you. So you stand there in silence of the mind. That silence itself contains the truth, becomes manifest. That's why Prabhupada said that thing that I say over and over and over again, because it's a very important teaching, that Maya, this delusion that we're in, unties her knots of her own accord when placed in the light of awareness. When you sit and become aware of your awareness, what you see will align to its true nature. When you are silent, deeply silent, no thought within, in that silence, things are as they are. You no longer have to search to find out who you are and what you are. It becomes obvious to you. You no longer have to wonder the nature of the universe. It is obvious to you. You do not any longer have to sort through a relative mind to find your answer to questions. Those answers are inherent in you. They are implicated. And in that silence, you're instantly, spontaneously aware of what is necessary to be aware of. In the moment, Sri Nisargadatta says, in the moment, all the tools necessary to navigate it perfectly are spontaneously available to the enlightened soul. That's why enlightened souls are said to be perfect. They cannot act imperfectly because they have no particular sense of I that separates them from the whole. So they move in perfect harmony with the oneness, with the wholeness of it all. There's no ego present, or enough ego perhaps to drive a body, but no more than that. By continuing your practice with this sort of understanding, you can improve yourself. But if you try to attain something without this understanding, you cannot work on it properly because you're working within the dream, right? If in the dream you're cold and you think, the way to fix this is to build a nice house so I can be warm. So in the dream, you spend a great deal of effort building a wonderful house to be warm in. And then you wake up in the morning and you realize your blankets weren't on you. And that's why you were cold. Building the house in the dream did not solve your coolness. You had to come to realize your nature. And by realizing your nature, the source of the problem is taken care of. So it's like that. If we're trying to do something, we're in ego space. And the ego keeps us in ego space by identifying with thoughts, right? Its favorite thoughts are, I can't meditate. Its favorite thoughts are, this is going to take me lifetimes. Its favorite thoughts are, oh my gosh, I barely have time for this. I wonder if I'm going to make it to my appointment. Maybe I'll cut 5 minutes off my meditation today. Anything that puts you in a state where things need to be done, the ego loves that. That's what perpetuates its myth. It doesn't exist. So it's always concerned with justifying its existence. And so to do that, it'll make you feel like a horrible person. because then you're out of balance. You have to work at becoming a great person. And that's a lifetime achievement for an ego, right? But we are trying to bypass that entirely by saying we are not that. We're not the ego. That perfection we seek already exists. That's why we know we need to seek it when we're in ego space, right? But the way to do that is not to dig out through ego space, but to simply detach and let the ego disappear. The ego requires a noisy mind to manifest. With a quiet mind, there's no story because there's no past. An ego is based entirely on your past. And it uses that past to look at the moment and make it imperfect. Why? Because then it can create a future in which it fixes that problem. Oh, one day I'll be enlightened. One day I'll know God. One day I'll be the best person on the planet, you know. And if you have no idea what you're involved in, what's going on, you think, oh, one day I'll be rich. One day I'll have a beautiful husband or wife. You know, one day I'll have a big enough house and I'll have plenty of cars. We go on solving the problem that we know exists because we've identified with something other than our nature. We've identified with something we are not. And so we see the problem. But if we don't realize the problem is that identity itself, then we go on trying to solve it through the ego rules, through the body and mind. And we get more and more lost, more and more confused. Why isn't this working? How is this possible? You lose yourself in the struggle for your goal. That's right. You've stepped in to the ego. You've stepped into the problem. Now you have no basis. You're relative. You're relative in a relative world. And if you're a relative in a relative world, there is no meaning. You don't know up from down. You can be convinced of anything in that space. Just read the internet these days. You can see you can be convinced of anything. But this is not the truth. The truth is you are outside of that, or the container of that whole, right? You are that container of that story. So remove thought, and that removes history. Step out of the relativity of the mind, you find your immortality. You understand the nature of eternity, right? And from there, things heal themselves because you're in the company of perfection. And that divine light will comb your individual self to be tangle free. But if you're in the tangle, trying to undo the tangle, round and round it goes, round and round. You lose yourself in the struggle for your goal. You achieve nothing. You just continue to suffer in your difficulties. But with right understanding, you can make some progress. Then whatever you do, even though not perfect, will be based on your innermost nature. And little by little, something will be achieved when measured from ignorance. When measured from ignorance. Which is more important, to attain enlightenment or to attain enlightenment before you attain enlightenment? To make $1 million or to enjoy your life in effort little by little, even though it is impossible to make that million to be successful, or to find some meaning in your effort to be successful? If you do not know the answer, you will not even be able to practice Zazen. If you do know, you will have found the true treasure of life. You know, that's what he's alluding to here is his first statement when he started the book. He said that we do not sit in order to become enlightened. We sit in order to realize we are already enlightened. So it's not an effort. It's not achievement. It's a realization of something that is. And that something that is can only be recognized when all assumptions about it are removed, when all stories of your past that define you in this moment are removed, so that you can see it as it is and not as you're told it is. That's the problem with constant thinking. Thinking is never in the present. It's always just slightly in the past. Because by the time anything forms in the mind, it has already changed. It's already different, right? And by the time you have a thought about it, my goodness, you're way out of date. So this is the nature of the puzzle. And this is the biggest hint to its escape through understanding. Anybody have any comments or questions? We've got about 9 more minutes and we've come to the end of our chapter. These are all things we've talked about quite a bit. It seems like this chapter, since it's coming close to the end, is probably hashing out the important things. You know, the thing is in the moment, it's always so wonderful. Let go of everything for a moment. Let go of all of your thoughts that create an anxiety, that create a sense of something needs to be done. Let go of all the guilt or the shame or the history or the whatever, based on patterns that you remember from an imagined past. Let go of all of that and just expand. Don't pay attention to any one feeling in the body at a time. Try to open the mind to be aware of everything in the body at once. Don't think one thought at a time, you know, by owning only a single thing and moving on to the next. Own the mind in its entirety. Embrace everything within it with no resistance, but attached to no particular. No particular. That's practice. That's removing ignorance. And when that when that comes to its fruition, as it were, when you manage to remove your sunglasses, the sun appears. Right? You didn't create the sun. The sun was always there. You just took off your blocking glasses. And the scriptures say your ego, this sense of particularization, is the blind that prevents you from seeing that perfect whole, that perfect oneness. God, if you're a bhakti, that if you're a jnani. But in the end, it becomes all one. The one formula that explains all things if you're a materialist. Ideas, concerns, thoughts, stories, challenges, inspirations, random words.
Swamiji,
Yes, Arjuna.
I kind of understand what you're saying, but I always come to the point that then you hear from don't identify. And you told the story about you were cold in your dream, and then you want to build a house, and then you woke up and you realized that the blankets were off of you. But to realize that, you had to wake up. And how to wake up? And don't identify, then I identify with not identify, and I think about it, and then I'm in the thinking, and I'm all confused and frustrated. So I'm always in that, how to stop that, to get that freedom. I understand what you're saying, but I cannot break out of it. I always find myself in the chitta, in the thinking how to do that, and then I realize, oh, I think how to do that, and now I'm in the thinking, and I'm in the ego, and then I'm confused and don't know what to do. How, and I hear what you say, and then it's so difficult.
Yes, you're right, Arjuna, and all of us are sitting together in the same boat. You know, it is a challenge. Now, unfortunately, it's not a quick, easy fix. If it was an actual problem, we could come up with a quick and easy solution. But in absence of a problem, we kind of have to sit here and make up a process without a problem. Within the Vedanta, there's 4 paths that they teach, and it's basically according to your own disposition. If you have the sense of the divine, of a God, or were raised in a tradition about God, then that unity is that quietness, and that unity is developed through love of that ideal and an absorption into that ideal. That love is one of those infinite attributes that actually has no definition. You can't really define love. It manifests in infinite ways. As a matter of fact, it's all that ever has manifested. And so you do it that way. If you're inclined more toward this objective method or scientific like method, then it's a matter of just sitting. There's several different types of meditation you can do. A mantra meditation, usually about a chosen ideal, like a Jesus or a Buddha or Rama or a Krishna, Ramakrishna, or the Divine Mother. That those mantras are used in order to create sort of a barrier of protection from the ever-changing mind, so you get some space to feel the intuited self, the self that's the eternal subject. It can never be objectified. So there's that path, and then there's the path of action. If you're someone who just simply can't sit still, just has to get going, do. Then you practice by being fully present in the moment, not doing anything for its result, but making the action itself the important thing and the focus, and to do it with full attention in the moment, no thoughts about it or surrounding it, doing it only. And as soon as you do it, you offer it to the universe, to your beloved, to knowledge, whatever your highest ideal is. You keep offering it and don't let it accumulate. So that's another practice. And then the final is mind control, where you literally try and when one thought ends, before the next thought begins, you try a series of practices and trainings and meditation to widen that space, because through that little interthought space there, the truth can be seen, the divine can be seen. And so those are our four choices. So really it's a matter of a practice that leads us there more than an answer that gets us there. So any of those, or a combination of those, I love them together, because they're all trying to solve the same problem, which is ignorance. And so sometimes for me, the real pure Jnani approach is wonderfully inspiring. I love that, waking up in the middle of the night. But because I was raised a bhakta, and because I really, by nature, probably am more bhakta than Jnani, God knows, then really I'm not looking for that. I'm in love with love itself. And so that by silencing the mind, the love of my nature, the beauty that is inherent in my nature, becomes apparent in that silence. I'm no longer distracted by mind. And so, I like to work with the fact that this moment is the I am. So you don't have to go find God. If we're going to talk in those terms, you don't have to go finding God. God is. And so you just simply be present in this moment. Just mindfully don't apply a story to it, and don't attach to a particular. Just watch it all go by. Enjoy it, but don't enjoy the objects. Enjoy what they imply. Intuit everything that they point at. I tell everyone I was doing yoga for a while. And one of the things I had to do, just this simple exercise, but we did it like 300 times. And you start doing that for 300 times, it starts really aching. And it's quite a miserable experience if you're identifying with body while you're doing it. But I found this trick just through desperation of, instead of paying attention to the movement, I paid attention to the stillness within me that knew there was movement. And so I let that movement point to something beyond it, something that provided the space for it to occur. And that removes your attention from body to a beautiful interior isness. And it's only interior because we define it such, but so taking all of those things together, it's not necessarily a step-by-step practice, because it's not a logical problem. Dreaming is not a logical problem. It's just a strange manifestation of isness that just has to be observed. So I know that doesn't give a great answer to your question, but it's kind of a more of a statement about the question only has meaning when we're identified. The question itself will just simply disappear without an answer, because you find there's not a necessary answer. The question and answers are always cause oriented, cause effect oriented. And we're talking about something that is only an effect. It is not a cause.
Yeah, that's what I always feel, that I'm staying always in that question. And
Yeah.
and somehow I missed the one thing that's real.
Well, that's seemingly true, but see, you haven't. The reason you know there's trouble is because that part of you that isn't in the changing is still manifesting, and that imbalance, the ego feels that imbalance. So you feel like there's a problem because of that identity. Know that and let that point to the truth. And so let go of the concern that rises in you about this wrong assumption that you're stuck in the world of change, or you're stuck in the world of identity. Let go of that, because making that assumption throws you out of balance, makes you look for a solution, and that looking for a solution itself is the problem. There is no problem, so there is no solution. So when you sit, instead of worrying about not being in the right place, or not understanding, or not having the mind calm, or being deluded, don't make any assumptions. Don't even make assumptions that you're not deluded and that you are the one and that you are ever free. Don't even make those, although those are good to counter. If you can't silence the mind, it's good to counter it with balancing truth. This is a non-problem. And so your meditation becomes just a continual layer of acceptance. You just keep accepting everything is perfect. The mind is noisy. Yes, it should be. That is the nature of mind. You don't worry about it. Don't get involved in it. Don't mess with it. Just watch it go. And when you get caught in it, when you come to realize you're caught in it, don't be caught in it. In that moment that you realize you're caught in it, just don't be caught in it. Don't create a story that links it to something in the past that says, oh God, I can't do this. I always run into the same problem. You see that story, that's ego. Just simply bring it back and keep going. And when it drifts off again, bring it back again, and just continually bringing it back. That itself, that awareness that is there in those spaces, when you manage to remove the clouds, when you manage to just come back to being aware of being aware, which is how Ramana Maharshi talks about it, being awareness, being aware of awareness. And so we just sit in that space and keep bringing it back and keep bringing it back. And ultimately, habitually, we remain ourselves. We don't get caught up in fixing the problem. We just simply do what's necessary in the moment. Saint Brother Lawrence, that's his practice, and the practice of the presence of God. He makes a very important point there. Most of us get all caught up in the problem and solving it, and that's our trouble. He says, in the moment, if I find that I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, I stop. If I find that I'm not doing something that I should be doing, I do it. And that is the whole of my practice, sitting in the awareness of the presence of divine love, which is his added piece there. So from that perspective, that's how he did it. From this Buddhistic perspective, it's just constantly retaking the perspective of observer and not participant, constantly just watching. There's different practices for that. You can bring the objects into mind, name them, and let them go. Or you can just practice seeing things come and go in the window of the mind, and just understand with each one that the very fact that you are looking at it in the mind means that it is not you. If you are observing a thought, Clearly you're observing a thought. It is not me, so why would I allow it to define me? It's a thought. It's a wave. That's all. And so we just, whatever practice, whatever combination or set of, or any of these practices is up to you, but choose them and be dedicated to the practice, never to miss it, once or twice or 3 times a day, depending on what you're capable to do, anywhere from 2 minutes to 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever you think you can do. I always tell people, when I started, I did 2 minutes twice a day. And all I did was just sit in front of a shrine. And at that time, I just thought about God because I didn't know really much more than that. And so I just did it 2 minutes twice a day. And look at the trouble I got into with that. So, anything that you're dedicated to, the divine, that divine isness, however you want to talk about it, I always talk about it as the beloved, because that's how it feels to me. But however you're comfortable, if it's not God, then not God. If it's that, it's that. If it's universal love, then it's universal love. Names are unimportant, you know. So yeah, where do you live at? Are you in Holland?
Yes, in the Netherlands, in The Hague.
Oh, in The Hague, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you far from Padma?
Yeah, Padma is in Groningen.
Oh,
So that is up in the Netherlands, and I'm half in the Netherlands.
I see.
Ja, en ik ben in Breda.
Oh,
Er is ook nog iemand in Breda. Ja, dat ben
oké.
ik. Leuk dat je er bent. Hi.
Ja, dankjewel.
Vraag, ik heb veel eruit gehaald van het antwoord van de Swami.
Ja, ik ook.
Oké, was good. Good question.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. But the answer was better.
Yes, very, very good.
So,
It helped me a lot, Swamiji.
are you guys closer? You and Ava, are you guys closer together than opposite ends of the country? No?
I'm in the south. I'm in the south, then The Hague, and then Padma.
Oh, I see. So you're all as far away as you can get and still
Yeah.
be in Holland.
But it's
Yeah,
a
and
small.
the Netherlands is not that big. So
No, well, depends on the size of the heart. There it is. But you know, I'm just asking because you guys could really be helpful to each other. Maybe you guys could organize a retreat together, you know, or something, or a reading time regularly, or just this together too is fine. But I don't know, just an idea.
We need you in the midst.
Yes, well, at some point I might be over there. There's a group in Switzerland
Here.
that they keep.
You should just come here, Swami.
Yeah, we have to organize that, Padma.
Yes, I could just walk out the door and keep walking, I guess, and then swim for a while. No, I imagine it will unfold at some point. But you know, as things happen, they happen.
No, just let it be.
That's
Happen.
it. That's it. That's really that's the only thing that happens anyway. Things happen and our mind makes up a story to explain it. That's the thing. Yeah. Because I've struggled with that idea. Ramakrishna says you're not the doer. I've struggled with that because, you know, it's easy to think I'm the doer. I'm pretty much convinced most of the time that I'm the one doing these things.
Mhm.
And
that's the whole point.
but if you start realizing, if you start paying attention, which is the point, the only thing necessary for the answers to all these questions is pure attention, purely paying attention. Yeah, Ramakrishna says, what do you pay attention to? He says, if it's changing, know that it is unreal. If it is unchanging, that alone is real.
Mhm.
And so you sit there and like, you wonder, you know, I tell this story again and again. I'm surprised everybody comes back because I keep telling the same stories. I bore myself with it, but in the sense, they're wonderful. They've been the keys for me. And that was the day that I first read that in the gospel. I ran up to the shrine to sit and to find the unchanging. And I sat there for 2 or 3 hours. I couldn't find anything that wasn't changing. I could not come up with a single thing that didn't change. And I went down to the lunch table and Swami Prabhupada was there. And I said, Maharaj, you know, I read that the unchanging alone is real. But I sat there for 3 hours. I could not find a single thing or even an idea that doesn't change. And he said, yes, it is true. And he stopped for a moment, and he had the ability to generate profound silence when he wanted. And he sat there quietly for a moment, and then he looked at me and he said, "But did you consider that which was seeking?" You know, and that light went on in my head, that it's that in me that was looking for the unchanging, that is itself the unchanging. That sense of I that I've carried in a changing body for 58 years is the unchanging. That I that remains the same, even though the mind changes at a rapid pace at every moment. That steady sense of I is the unchanging. That is what is real. And that's where we have to dwell. That's where we have to move our understanding of ourself to. Right? Because we find the qualities of unchanging mean no boundaries, means no time. It means no cause and effect. And all of that becomes apparent, becomes obvious to us when we step there. The first time that we manage for a split second to sit in that unchanging nature. All of that information is immediately available, and you're changed. Your understanding, which is beyond understanding, affects you for forever. But yeah, just keep open to these ideas. Keep doing what inspiration leads you to, and little by little, let it fall away. Because it's not a matter of adding, it's a matter of removing.
Yes.
All right. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
It's beautiful.
Shaima, it is beautiful by the very nature. Beauty is the name of the divine, meaning that it has beauty is one of those things that can't be defined, but we know what it means. So we know our nature is beauty. So when we see beauty, let it remind you of your nature. It's a direct reflection of something in you. It's wonderful. All right. Very good. I have to
Thank you,
vacate the house.
Maharaj.
Indeed.
Thank
Be
you, sir.
well.
Thank
And
you,
those who are
Swami.
good,
Thank
I'll
you.
see you tonight. And those who
Thank
aren't,
you.
I'll see you next week. All right.
Thank
you,
Jai
Swami.
Maharaj, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji, Jai one without a second.